Hello everybody. Next up we visit the Toilet Bowl home of Tottenham Hotspur. The fixtures moved about a lot over the last few weeks, and at the time of writing it'll be an 8:15pm kickoff on Thursday night, with TV coverage, if we can call it that technically, courtesy of somebody called Amazon Prime. This will be an unusual experience for their supporters. Playing football on a Thursday is usually a privilege reserved for those teams involved in European competition. You know, like us, or Brighton, just to name but two. So, Spurs then. Now, they're the club that, if it were an Only Fools and Horses character, would definitely be Trigger. They've definitely been value for money on the comedy front this season. We've had the usual stuff from their support, delusional hardly seems adequate as a word, as to how this was definitely their year, what with their having signed Postecoglou from Celtic to change things around for them. And on the face of it, winning 8 and drawing 2 out of their first 10 games looked to be a smashing start, as long as you didn't look that closely. In those first 10 games, they met Brentford, Man United, Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Luton, Fulham and Palace. So that's 4 dead certs to be involved in the relegation struggle, 3 bang-average middle-table merchants, and Man United so poor that one of their supporters elected to announce publicly last week that they were swapping allegiances to Spurs, something that tells you a lot about both clubs, and only really 2 teams of any sort of quality in Liverpool and Arsenal. They took all 3 points against Liverpool courtesy of the sort of refereeing performance that Liverpool themselves thought they had a copyright on, whilst they were very much fortunate to come away with a share of the points in the Derby of the Ignorant at the Emirates. So never mind the fact they've beaten a bunch of championship-level sides, it's still definitely going to be their year. Then things started to go a little bit wrong. They went 4-1 down at home to Chelsea in a match that saw their supporters applaud them off, despite the manifestly self-inflicted nature of their defeat, which would have been a cricket score but for Chelsea's inability to twig how to breach a short-handed, suicidally high defensive line. The penny finally dropped in the closing stages as they figured out that all they had to do to stop getting caught offside was to start the runs they were making from their own half. Basic stuff really, but a lesson that it took Chelsea far too long to learn. That was followed by a match against Wolves in which they took the lead and parked the bus before being turned over 2-1. Then there was last week's 3-3 draw at Manchester City. Now that sort of result is creditable enough, I suppose, but the home side should have been over the horizon well before the equaliser, which was probably Spurs' third effort on goal in the whole match. Even then, Spurs had to rely on Ref Hooper having the sort of brainstorm that is the trademark of England's referees these days. That decision not to play advantage was a corker that I'm looking forward to hearing an explanation of from Howard Webb's new programme, Shucks We Got It Wrong Again. Meanwhile, all of this has left them in 5th place with 27 points from the 14 played so far. Now, Daisy tells me that the first new player was in fact a signing from the 2022-23 season. Destiny Udogie was signed back then from Udinese before immediately being loaned back to the Italian side, making this season his first full season at Tottenham. The fact that he was signed last term has denied me the opportunity of inquiring of Daisy how much was Udogie in the window, something that I've been dying to say for weeks. The first of the permanent signings was actually a loan conversion in the form of Dejan Kulusevski. He actually arrived in January 22, with his fee coming to £45 million, including the loan and the permanent tranches of the deal. Guillermo Vicario's initial fee from Empoli was a reported £17.2 million. The deal includes add-ons for things like Spurs winning the league, so that'll be £17.2 million in total then. Vicario is a replacement between the sticks for the increasingly reliable Lloris, who was replaced as captain by Son. Lloris still remains on their books, though he's not been included in the first team squad of late. He was left behind pre-season to sort himself out a new club, but none materialised, meaning that he's stuck there for another month or so at least. They spent £40 million on Leicester midfielder James Maddison, who didn't hang around to see what the Championship looked like following relegation. He's out until the new year with an ankle injury, thus giving Gareth Southgate yet another excuse to pick Jordan not good enough Henderson in every single damn squad. Incidentally, Maddison's other half is called Kennedy Alexa, which is not particularly relevant, but is something that may have messed up your smart speaker just now. Another loan to permanent deal arrived in the form of Pedro Porro. His deal cost Spurs £40 million plus 15% of somebody called Marcus Edwards, in one of those deals that involves economic rights. Spurs had earlier sold off 50% of the rights in Edwards to Vitória de Guimarães. I have no idea who owns the rest of the player. It may be like that racehorse that Daisy owns 1/4000th of, and there's some sort of syndicate involved. Incidentally, unlike Spurs last weekend, Daisy's horse won. The signing of Mana Solomon from Shakhtar Donetsk didn't cost a bean. The Israeli international took advantage of the FIFA ruling that allows foreign players on the books of Ukrainian clubs to leave as free agents following the Russian invasion. He's got 37 caps for Israel at present. He's another one that will miss out on Thursday with a meniscal tear that required surgery. That'll keep him away till January. It cost them €50 million to bring in Dutchman Mickey van der Ven from Wolfsburg. However, we won't be seeing the central defender, who has 2 Dutch caps to date, as he's part of their injury list. The spate of dodgy hamstrings and stuff and the like is probably being blamed on a dodgy lasagna or something, I expect. They raided the more prosaic locale of Nottingham, where £45 million was enough to persuade Nottingham Forest to release Brennan Johnson. The attacker is the son of former Ipswich and indeed Forest striker David Johnson, and he's a regular on the international scene, if only for Wales, who've awarded him 24 caps to date. As hinted, their injury list may be on the lengthy side. Apart from those already mentioned, they will be without Peresic, who's got a knee problem, Betancourt, ankle, Senyason, thigh, Sarr, other, Malik Whiteman, ankle, and Dyer, unspecified muscle. Richarlison returned to action last weekend, while Cesar Romero, who I'm sure is the guy who played the Joker in the brilliant 1960s TV version of Batman, will return from suspension for the red card he picked up during the Chelsea match. Let's move on to the wild and wacky world of association football. And there was a blast from the past earlier on where Sky, ESPN, the Manchester Evening News and the Mirror were all banned from Manchester United's latest press conference. Welcome to the club, guys. It's not for them publishing stuff we don't like, claimed beleaguered boss Ten Hag. It's for not letting us try and lie our way out of it, which weren't his exact words, but were a fair approximation of what he actually meant. All this as echoes of the media manipulation days of Ferguson's reign resounded around the room. Elsewhere, not having found anyone else to blame, Sheffield United sacked boss Paul Heckingbottom. Owner Prince Abdullah, fresh from receiving his orders from Saudi as to which way to vote on the connected club loan proposals, confirmed the reappointment of Chris Wilder, claiming that Wilder was the best guy on planet Earth to take over just now. This would have been why the Blades had to fight off precisely 0 other clubs for the manager's services. The Prince confirmed that Wilder was very optimistic that he can save the season, which was somewhat perplexing. I thought they'd banned the use of nitrous oxide outside of operating theatres and the studios used to record Mrs. Brown's Boys and Strictly Come Dancing. However, Wilder seems to have got hold of some. And so to us then. Well, we're going to have to learn how to deal with anti-football sooner rather than later. Palace came with little other intention than to spoil and hope for a point. And in a match in which they created next to nothing, we handed it to them. Zuma's understandable absence cost us, as a clearly not match-fit Dinos handed them the equaliser on a plate. Palace were assisted in their endeavours by Michael Oliver, who was clearly miffed at not being given a game further up the table, and he made every effort to stamp his mark on the game, falling for every dive going. When a goalkeeper holds onto the ball in stoppage time and the referee doesn't spot it because he's ambling around with his back turned, you can tell that he thought the game was beneath him. Under the reign of Riley at PGMOL, there were 2 main problems. The first was a failure to deal with those officials who simply were not up to the job. The second was a benign tolerance of all the attention seekers who saw the laws of the game as something of an inconvenience. Nowadays, we're seeing more officials suspended when major errors are made, which is an improvement of sorts. But Webb clearly has much to do about those who look on Mike Dean as some sort of role model rather than the stain on the game that he actually was, or is. Oliver is one of those who sees himself as fireproof, and a bored, disinterested run-out like Sundays really ought to be looked at, but it won't be. Not that Oliver was to blame for us dropping 2 points. We were more than capable of doing that ourselves, with, kudos apart, a lacklustre performance that was bereft of the ideas and creativity that one needs to unlock such matches. I guess if you're looking, though, for a bright side, at least we're not Palace. There was a team so dire that half of Croydon hops up the M6 to watch Manchester United instead every couple of weeks. On the injury front, Antonio, who, for all the criticism that he gets, has been much missed of late, will be another week or so from a return. The only other absentee last week was Zuma, whose cat burglars should be keeping a low profile, if only for their own safety, lest certain people learn of their identity, or so I understand. Zuma should be available this time round. So, on to the prediction then. Well, their luck has to run out sometime. I mean, surely they've had their dose of appalling refereeing decisions in their favour for the next 2 seasons or so. Problem I have is that, at the moment, we're not taking the game to the opposition enough for my liking. And when that happens, we end up getting dragged down into a war of attrition, and the Palace game was a prime example of that. Given that we are a bit out of sorts at present, I think we might have to settle for a draw on this occasion. So the £2.50 that I was going to chip in towards the reward money for the Zuma burglary will instead be placed on the Winston Turf Accountancy app on a draw. Let's make it 1-1, shall we? Enjoy the game.